Well, welcome back, and here we are in the second to last session in the book of Ruth as we've been studying how God's creating this mosaic out of imperfect and messy people, yet through Him actively working, this masterpiece is being laid out for us. And last week we read the climax of the love story where there was a conflict in the story of Boaz and Ruth, where there's a redeemer who's kind of standing in the way, somebody closer to the line of Elimelech that could redeem the family land and would ultimately also have to redeem Ruth, but he chose not to, paving the way for Boaz to take over and step in and become the kinsman redeemer of Elimelech's line, and also marry Ruth to continue this great love story. And now we step into chapter 4, verse 13, where we literally see the consummation of this love story. And this is what the author, kind of coming off of the climax and this crescendo that happened last week, this is how the author continues the story on. He says this: "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception. And she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him.' Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, 'A son has been born to Naomi.'" Now, we're not going to read the name. We're going to stop there at verse 17, because the final act of this play next week is really where we see the masterpiece take full shape. But now, in this moment, our love story has met its destination. Ruth and Boaz are now married. And it says that he went into her, and they consummated the marriage, and we see again for the second time the Lord, Yahweh, actively working. For 10 years she was married to Mahlon, and her womb was closed. She now has been married to Boaz, and her womb has been opened. And there's a reason for that, because God in His sovereignty is orchestrating this family lineage for what is to come. And in this moment we see, and I want to take this moment to look at this story through Naomi's perspective. We've done this in chapter 1, where we looked at the just cost of her losing her husband, losing her 2 sons, being in a house with 2 foreign women. And now we see that she has been provided financially through chapters 2 and 3 by Boaz with food. And now she's got a grandbaby on her lap, and her need for family has also been fulfilled. When she, in the end of chapter 1, says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me bitter, for I've gone away full and come back empty." Now, as the women of her town tell her, the Redeemer has come and has restored your life. You no longer need to be called Mara. Now you can be Naomi again, because the Redeemer has restored your life. And I also want to look at very closely the way that Ruth has been transformed in the words of the author as well. When Ruth first meets Boaz, she calls herself a slave servant. And then she gets called a handmaiden. And now she is called a wife. The transformation of being Ruth the Moabitess, Ruth the foreigner, Ruth the gleaner, who is presenting herself as essentially a slave servant to Boaz, through redemption and through kindness, has been transformed from slave to wife, from slave to bride. And much in the same way that Ruth was transformed through her Redeemer of Boaz, and the truth that was provided in that moment, the financial security, the family security. Ruth's story is our story. Because Paul will write in Romans that if you sin, you are a slave to sin. But God has, as we talked last week, adopted and chosen and restored and redeemed us. So no longer do we need to be called slaves to sin. But the picture that Paul writes in Ephesians is that we are actually the bride of Christ. If in chapter 1, the gospel is clearly presented through Elimelech and Ruth, Elimelech choosing to feast after idols and continuing to pursue idols of financial security, and Ruth being born into sin, much like we are born into the original sin of Adam. So too does Ruth's story of redemption become our story, because yes, we are born into original sin, but through the Redeemer, through Christ, we are given a new life. We are restored to life. And if we see from Naomi's perspective, she has the child laid on her lap. And that child laid on her lap has got to be a sense of peace, a sense of rest, and just a perfect picture of God's plan for her life. She did not know when she was in Moab how things were going to go. In fact, in chapter 1, you see her in the fields trying to provide for herself. And yet, through hearing that God was working in Bethlehem, she gets to Bethlehem, she recognizes the Redeemer that is there, and ultimately her life is restored. And this happens through Boaz. It happens through the character of who Boaz is. It happens through the person and the man that Boaz is, with his integrity, with his honesty, with his reputation and his character, being a perfect representation of the ultimate Redeemer, who is Jesus Christ, the one who said that he came to give us life and to give it abundantly, the one who said that I have come to set men free, that there's no greater love that a man has than that he lay down his life for his friends. Boaz is not getting credit for the son that was born because he's carrying on Elimelech's line. Yet Christ has also died so that we can live. The legacy, the life is continuing on because of the Redeemer. And there's an ultimate purpose for this. And the ultimate purpose will be seen next week when we look at the lineage that is created from Judah, Tamar, Perez, through Ruth and Boaz, to the ultimate King of Israel. And we'll pick up on that next week.